of the Senate Study Committee on Development Authorities and Downtown Development Authorities. It is now 3:30. We appreciate those who are with us in person as well as those who are joining us via Zoom. We're going to begin our meeting today with an invocation. I'm going to ask Senator Dixon if he would please provide an invocation. Number, what number?
14.
All right.
If you would please bow your head and pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray for you to part the ways in the street that Senator Mullis is on and bring him here to the Capitol. Lord, we also pray for wisdom and a hedge of protection around this committee as we make some decisions and have some votes, cast some votes today, Lord. And I pray for our first responders and our military folks serving here and abroad. I pray that the ones that are serving abroad, you bring them home safely, and please keep a hedge of protection around them as well. In your loving name, I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Senator. Again, this is the final meeting of the Study Committee on Development Authorities and Downtown Development Authorities. And we are going to take up one agenda item, and that is the final report of the committee. The committee members have copies of this report in draft form. What I'd like to do this afternoon is, first of all, address the background information that has been distributed. This basically chronicles the work of the committee, gives the background on development authorities, chronicles the work of the committee and all of the testimony and input that we have received. And I appreciate folks being a really strong and active, engaged group. We've heard from any number of individuals, but we'll talk about that component first and verify that there are no concerns associated with that. Then that's on pages 1 through 21. And then we will separately consider we'll separately consider findings and concerns. So the first part is pages 1 through 19. Then we'll consider findings and conclusions and concerns on pages 20 and 21. And then finally, we'll deal with recommendations beginning on page 22. When we get to recommendations, we'll take them one at a time. And I'll ask the committee for their concerns or input on that. If we have any concerns on a recommendation, we'll discuss that. And then if necessary, make whatever modifications are appropriate. So for the first part, I'd like to thank Kaylee Maxwell for her good work in providing the background of the study, as well as the summary of the testimony and the discussion that the committee has had since our first meeting on July the 22nd, to include meetings on August 25th, November 10th, November 17th, November 30th, and now today. Are there any comments or adjustments, changes that you would like to see made on pages 2 through 19? You've had a chance to review those. Any adjustments or changes from pages 2 through page 19? And
Chairman Burns, can you hear me?
We can. Senator Gooch, thank you for joining us via Zoom.
I apologize. I'm not there. I'm stuck in a multi-car traffic injury wreck on 575. I'm not involved, but I'm sure this is going to be a while. So I'm grateful that we have this technology. Your page numbers they don't include the recommendations, correct? I just want to make sure that we're not talking about the recommendations.
Yeah, the ones that we're discussing now, this is just the study committee creation, focus, and duties.
Okay.
And then the background, and then basically a summary of testimony and discussion. It does not include any findings or concerns or recommendations.
Gotcha. Thank you. Just let us know when we get to that part where the recommendations are.
We'll go through that. We'll go through that one at a time. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Now we're waiting on Chairman Mullis. Chairman Mullis is also stuck in traffic somewhere around North Avenue, and hopefully he can join us He may also wish to use the Zoom option to make sure that he's a participant. But any discussions on pages 2 through 20, 2 through 19? Any questions? Any comments? Any changes? Hearing none, is it the consensus of the committee to accept this documentation? So move. I have a motion. Second. All those in favor indicate the uplifted hand. All right, we have accepted the background information from pages 2 through 19.
Oh, wait.
Hold on. We got a hold on there. What's the hold on?
I might have to ask for a retraction of the prior motion just to correct a little typo that I just noticed.
Oh,
It's actually a misspelling of a name and we may as well have it correct.
without objection, a Scribner's
A Scrivener's error,
error.
actually two.
All right.
Might as well correct both ones. I just do that now. So on the meeting 3, page 14, it says Don Bola, Chair, Development Authority of DeKalb County. It's actually Bolia, so B-O-L-I-A.
A correct.
B-O-L-I-A. And then I know that DeKalb County Commissioner Jeff Rader is referenced in a couple different meetings, and he is R-A-D-E-R. That was just a little Scrivener's error there.
And I believe he is referenced on page
I see his name
18.
and on 14. I see.
All
him on
right. So multiple
14.
times the word
Yeah.
R-A-D-A-R should be R-A-D-E-R. Is that correct?
Yes. And it's right a couple times. I see it here on 13 where it's correct, but I see it as R-A-D-A-R a few times. So
All right.
may as well make that consistent and
Absolutely.
correct.
Absolutely.
I apologize for just noticing that.
I
as
thank you for catching those mistakes. Again, those are
small ones. but-
small corrections.
Yep, small corrections. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. And without objection, we'll accept those. And again, I already have a motion and a second and a vote, so we'll accept those as amended, as corrected, I should say. All right, so let's move to page 20, which is at 20 and 21. And you will see a list of quote unquote findings. And then on page 21, you will see at the bottom, the committee articulates the following concerns. So I'm open to discussion on any adjustments or modifications to pages 20 and 21.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, yeah, madam.
for just logistical reasons, I don't have the printed copy on the document I have in front of me for those last pages. Is it possible that Ashley could send that to me or put it on the screen in some way?
Absolutely. We can either, let us send that to you. We have them here in the committee room, in the folders. I would say that those are the same findings that we discussed at our December 15th meeting. Is that right? Nope, this is the 15th, a week ago.
The 30th meeting, but Ashley, can you email me that document? Thank you.
Okay. And again, they're the same things, but they were cleaned up a bit, thankfully. They were cleaned up and formatted, but there was no change in substance. Again, I enumerated these at our November 30th meeting. And we actually, I read every one of them off for the record. I won't do that again. Any questions on findings on page 20? And at the bottom of page 21 articulates the following concerns. Any questions, any concerns about those two pages? Hearing no concerns, is it the will of the committee to accept that as a part of the committee report?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, I have a second. Thank you, Senator Rhett. And again, all those in favor, same sign. We should be good to go. Senator Gooch, you okay?
Yes, sir. So far, I'm
I know are you sitting still?
Listening.
Are you safe? Can you get to a place?
Oh, yeah.
where-
Yeah, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be here
All
a
right.
while.
Is this a
I
little bit
could have
like
been at
the
the
one you
Capitol
and I
by now,
got
but I
into
won't.
400 a year or so back?
I think it's worse. Unfortunately, I think there's some bad injuries in this crash,
I'm
but
sorry to hear that. I'm
well,
sorry to hear that.
yeah.
Well, again, thank
Yeah.
you. Now, Senator Gooch and Chairman Oliver, and I would hope that Senator Mullis could join us. We're going to move to page 22 and 23, which are recommendations. All right. Now, as we deal with the recommendations, I would like for us to address each recommendation separately and get the will of the committee on every recommendation. If you have adjustments, if you feel like it's appropriate or inappropriate, whatever the will of the committee is, we'll begin with recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 1 states that we propose legislation to form a joint House Senate study committee on local development authorities to continue the work of this study committee and to engage with the House in this important work. Are there any concerns on recommendation number 1?
Chairman Burns, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Continue.
So I think first I want to compliment you on your thoroughness of what we've done on this committee for the past few months. I've been in the economic development business for several years, first as a commissioner and then as a director of the local development authority. And even after my 10 or 12 years of involvement, I learned stuff in this committee that I did not know before. So I applaud you and the committee for its work and the thoroughness of all the things that we looked into. And we had some really good debate and input from different consultants like Dan McCray and Ed Wall and many, many others, county commissioners, ACCG, and of course, the Georgia Economic Developers Association. I'm not sure what more we need to study on this topic. I think we have thoroughly dug into these topics. Unless there's another issue that we're not aware of, I'm not sure what else we would do if we had another study committee. Is there a reason that we need to propose doing this again?
I would, again, let me respond and I'll ask the committee to respond as well. I think that at the end of the day, there's very limited legislation that is being proposed. And I would say that legislation would be the least desirable way to resolve some of the concerns that we've identified. I would hope that the study committee could, an ongoing joint committee would engage members of the House so that they would be fully informed about the challenges that perhaps we need to address in Georgia. But more importantly, to encourage the profession, the economic development profession, to pursue best practices, to ensure that I believe, interestingly enough, I believe that we are much better. There's Senator Mullis. She made it. Hello. Yeah, I can tell you're in high speed mode. That's good. But you made it just at the right time, Chairman. But I would say the most important thing is that the vast majority of the concerns that have been expressed in this committee by entities impacted by development decisions can be addressed through best practices.
Right.
So it would not require legislative action. I would suggest that a follow-on joint committee could work in concert with GEDA and with Georgia Department of Economic Development in ensuring that best practices are identified and then ultimately implemented on a reasonable basis. And I realize that you can't get 100% concurrence on everything, but I do think that it's important that we pursue that. So I think that the first priority would be to have a study committee moving forward that engages the House, that supports ongoing development of best practice standards. And you know, again, we've got some concerns out there on notification and standing, and most of those things can be resolved through the adoption of best practice. So that's, I think that's the fundamental reason I would like to see it in the report.
Okay.
Other committee members. You're right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Chairman Bowles. We're glad you made it.
Didn't say that much longer.
Make us cry. Don't make us cry.
I just want to say, we had this Senate committee lasted throughout the summer and the fall and now into the winter, almost into the winter officially. And I think we've vetted it pretty good. We talked about a lot of different issues. I think we should allow the House an opportunity to form their own study committee and take a look at it. And what they come up with, then we come together and decide if we need a joint committee or if we have similar findings or dissimilar findings, because that's just my recommendation.
Other members of the committee?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
The House has had some very good discussions under the leadership of Chairman Darlene Taylor. But there are a number of policy questions that have not been resolved. And there are a number of other questions about data that have not been resolved. And let me give you some examples that I think would be appropriate in a focused way for a joint House and Study Committee. My experience in the House is that there are many members who are interested in this issue. It's very important to them in local committees and local economic development efforts. In relation to the duties we have given already in statute to DCA, Department of Community Affairs, there's a number of different gaps or opportunities available that I would like opportunity to explore more. And it deals with combination of information on total number of development authorities, total number of debts, and viability. What development authorities aren't really operating, what are operating in compliance with all the board positions. All of that is information we don't have. In terms of policy questions that are not resolved, that are in the courts right now, those court decisions are going to be resolved sooner or later, some of them sooner. And if we don't choose to make decisions at this point, which we're not ready for probably yet, we have an obligation to follow how the law is being changed by the courts around us. And that's a valuable discussion for us to have. I think this is too important a part of our economic development activities statewide not to pay very close attention. So, and my experience is, of course, that a joint House and Senate study committee has more of an opportunity to reach a consensus on what are the important issues that the body's operating independently.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Other comments or questions or recommendations?
I got lots to say. Are you ready?
I thought you might. That's why I waited on you.
And I apologize. I don't know if you're aware, Atlanta occasionally has a major traffic problem.
I had never noticed.
And
that.
I was in the middle of it. So I'm just proud to be here.
Right.
Look, my whole thing is just a advisory of caution. Mr. Chairman, I like what we've learned and talked about through this process, and I appreciate the best practices scenario. I think that's vitally important, but I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Or Georgia is #1 place to do business in America, according to not the owners or the publisher of the Site Selectors magazine. They survey site selectors to see what they think. And Georgia by far is #1. Only got a second rating in a thing that in the program that Tennessee was #1. But we're very far ahead. And I don't want anything we do to keep us from being #1 or #2. I don't want us to be number 50. So that is my fear.
I don't want us to be #2.
Well, I would blame you solely if we drop any.
I would agree. I would understand that. I would
No, I'm
understand that,
kidding. I'm
but-
kidding. Because I know you have your best interest in heart, but I just want to make sure that we don't go the wrong way in this. And we got to take care of the contractors with their issue. That's an easy one.
Well, we got a number of issues, but it's up to the committee what they choose to recommend.
But thanks for letting me be a part of that.
I'm glad you're here. Senator Gooch, since you raised the initial concern, do you have a recommendation? Do you have a request to withdraw the recommendation?
I would ask that we rescind number one and simply say that any senator or representative, I know Chairman Oliver's on the line here and she has great concern about some things going on in DeKalb County. I would recommend that she propose her own study committee in the House when we convene in January. If she feels strongly that we still have some work to do on this committee, then by all means, introduce a bill and get it through the House committee and bring it over to the Senate. We do study committees all the time, but I personally believe we pretty much beat this horse to death. So I would ask that we just rescind number one and move on to the next item.
All right, I have a motion to rescind recommendation one. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Voting members, what is your pleasure? Those who wish to rescind number one, vote by saying aye. I will say that Senator Gooch is an aye. Senator Mullis is an aye. Senator Rhett is an aye. Senator Dixon, we rescind recommendation number one. Moving forward.
I'm a no. I want to be recorded as a no, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
I appreciate that,
You're not on.
Chairman Oliver, but
Also a no.
all right, Chairman Oliver, we appreciate your input, but regrettably, this is not a joint committee.
I'm a no.
All right,
Write me
so
down
I
as
have
no.
a no from Senator Perry. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, also during the session, they can always meet
Absolutely.
and keep working on
All right,
this.
and by the way, I would hasten to add to Chairman Mullis's point. The fact that the committee doesn't recommend this, it doesn't mean that members cannot choose to recommend a similar type of a position.
Or
Is that
create-
correct?
Yeah, create legislation.
So, yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to number two. Additional training. Proposed legislation to provide additional training for Development Authority board members and directors under current law. Development Authority board members and directors must complete at least 8 hours of training within the first 12 months of their appointment to the board. Legislation should include more rigorous training and enforcement mechanisms for compliance, such as, again, these are just suggested such as is 2 hours of additional training per year for enforcement for board members and a suspension of voting eligibility of board members for failure to complete required training for 2 consecutive years. Again, any legislation that might be proposed would have to flesh this out, but that's the current proposed recommendation for legislation. Is there discussion?
Look, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I am okay with that. But when you have volunteers that are on board members, local boards, it may be tough for them to do it within a year. Now, I'm not saying that
2
you
hours.
can't, but they need to, yeah, really.
Well, I mean, lawyers have to do like that. I'm not
Yeah, but
sympathetic.
they
to
don't,
that.
y'all get paid for that, but they don't, that's what I'm
Mm,
saying.
No, you don't.
No, I think so. I doubt if they pay you for
No.
maintaining your current training, do they?
Oh, but anyway, I'm just saying, you can talk about volunteers. In my area, they're often more mature people, older people. So I'm just saying, now, I'm not against this, but just a caveat of thought.
All right, I appreciate that. And I would suggest that as we proceed through the recommendations, any legislation would still have to be crafted. No, it will not be, the committee will not craft legislation. So what I'd ask members of the committee to do is when you see an area that you feel is
Okay.
important enough, you develop and propose the legislation, and you will know that the committee at least supports that effort. So number two on additional training. And again, this is something we heard quite a bit of. I appreciate Senator Mullis. Senator Gooch, any comments?
No, I think this is reasonable and may not be necessary, but I think it may be something that we can get behind going forward. We'll just have to look at the legislation as it comes across the committee.
I agree.
Yes.
The legislation would have to go through the regular vetting process in both the
Yep.
House and the Senate.
I would propose that, Mr. Chairman, but also propose that legislators should put that in their biennial training too, perhaps.
That
Yeah,
would,
we don't have
I
to add
think-
it, but.
yeah, I think say that would be a good addition to any. particular
Because they don't, we don't understand it unless we do it kind of thing. Or
It's a
of
good-
course, Senator Parent is a good friend of mine and she's an authority on many things with her lawyer ability. So.
Yep.
You know what I'm
Thanks.
saying?
Yeah.
All right,
Because of all the CLE I have to do.
do I have a consensus that number 2 stays in the recommendations?
So moved.
So, thank you, Chairman Wallace. Second from Senator Dixon. All those in favor indicate with the hand. Senator Ditch, thank you. And that is unanimous. All right, we're moving on, making progress. Number 3, this deals with interim membership, maintaining interim memberships. Number 3 says proposed legislation requiring development authority boards maintain interim membership to their boards through a limit to holdover voting eligibility to within 6 months of the expiration of a sitting member's term. Such legislation would maintain accountability to current government authorities and public stakeholders.
Mr. Chairman, does that mean that they can be reappointed by their authority? I mean, by
Absolutely.
the county commission?
By the commission, absolutely.
All right.
It doesn't change the reappointment process. It doesn't impose any limitation.
They just got to do it.
They just got to do it.
Okay.
Right. So the
gotta-
question is, if they're a holdover, then they're technically must be operating in contravention of some, I don't know if it's a law, but some policy.
If they're.
Is it the law that they're operating in?
I think the
in contravention
statute
of-
currently allows them to serve until
I don't think-
replaced or reappointed. Is that correct?
Uh,
All right.
Okay, so they are not then.
So
They're
they're
out of
not-
term, but they're not actually.
They're out of
it's- yeah.
term, but they're not, but they're still legally serving.
Right,
as
so
a
they're
member.
legally serving, but I think the point that is on here that lessens accountability to governing authorities and public stakeholders is probably accurate.
I would say that it is more administrative
Yeah,
than substantive.
Look, I think there's a lot of appointments by the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker,
Yeah.
and then it could that have just not ever, they're still there until they make,
Exactly.
you know, I don't know what the reasoning is, but I think that's a truth.
I think you would be correct. But in this recommendation for legislation, will require legislation.
Yeah.
But the legislation would require the governing authority
Yes.
to reappoint or appoint a new member within 6 months. Senator Gooch, how do you feel about number 3?
Yeah, I'm still trying to absorb it, trying to understand it actually, but I'm just listening right now.
A little bit.
It stems from a situation that we learned that where some development authorities have multiple members who are continuing to serve after their terms have expired, but the reappointment of that individual has not been administratively followed in a timely manner.
well, the riskier part, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, appeared to as well be that some can go dormant even for a period of years and then
Then
pop back up, which is to me the somewhat more potentially concerning thing. I mean, it seems like it's just good practice to have them,
There you go. What'd you call that earlier?
Best practice,
practices.
best practice.
right?
But
I mean, I'm
in
sure we could
this
agree.
case, It would
that's
require,
practice,
this is not the development authority's best practice. This is the governing authority's best practice.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, I'm familiar with Economic Development Authority and they write the government authority and say, hey, so-and-so's term is up.
Yes,
We recommend you
Yes.
reappoint that, but you know, who would you like?
that's right.
That's what should
And
happen.
that's what should happen.
Yes.
And all we're asking is that be done in a reasonable manner.
So how can we make them, I mean, how can we urge them to do that?
If we adopt this legislation, they have 6 months. And then what would happen is if they did not reappoint, they're down one member of the
They're
board.
dormant.
Well, they go down, they just, at some point in time, they would lose a quorum. Certainly not initially, but it just is encouragement to reappoint in a timely manner.
Well, so, Mr. Chairman, if we recommend this, it's not necessarily any of us gonna, well, I won't, can create this legislation,
True,
but,
But-
and then the debate on the floor perhaps would, gain support or,
flesh it out, or it would, it would have to go through the process for sure.
okay.
Any further discussion? Do we have consensus on number 3? Any objection?
I don't.
All right, then, do I have a motion, second, and a vote just for the record? Have a motion from Senator Parent.
I'll grunt, yes.
Bill Grunt, yes. Senator Mullins, second. All those favorite indicate with uplifted hand. Senator Gooch, are you okay with 3?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, thank you. We're quickly closing in on legislation. The number 4 is a proposed legislation to cure contractor liability
That's an
exposure.
easy yes,
All right, I'm glad to hear that because
because he's out here looking at
he's
it.
looking at, that's right. Right there looking at me dead in the eye. But again, this was legislation. This is proposed legislation that would cure contractor liability exposure.
that's
Any
perfect.
discussion on number
Perfect for
4?
Brett over there.
And this is specifically for local development authority projects with a use effort lease agreement. So it's
Mhm,
very,
yes.
very narrowly focused.
Seems like something we need to take care of. So I'll
Yeah,
make a motion that we
Thank you.
move
Have a
forward.
motion,
second.
a second. All those in favor? We're good. Are you good, Senator Gooch?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, then. The last proposed legislation
Oh, it's really.
deals with reporting. And it's unfortunate that we have to do this, but we have in code a statutory requirement that certain information be provided to DCA on the issuance of debt in the amount over $1 million. This is simply to add one line so that it would also require that they report, that the report includes whether or not the issued bond is part of a bond for title transaction. And I would suggest that I would hope that in the future, we wouldn't have statutory reporting requirements because it limits us. This is just to collect information on whether or not the bond that was issued of over $1 million was a bond for title transaction. Any questions? Any concerns?
Chairman Burns,
Yes, sir.
do you know if this requirement that you're talking about, code section 36-82-10, do you know any of the details of that code section? Because I have not looked it up.
It is essentially the requirement for DCA to collect information on bonds issued by development authorities. And regrettably, it is in code. So we don't have the luxury of going to DCA and asking them to administratively address this issue. And I would say again, and I would echo Senator Mullis's comment, these are recommendations.
Yeah.
The code, the legislation would have to be drafted. It would have to go through the committee process. It would have to be adopted. It would have to go to the House. It had to go through full vetting. So this is not something that would be assured. And I think as we get into code section 36-82-10, the caveats might be a challenge. And in such case, that legislation might not move forward. But the attempt is basically to collect information at the point of bond issuance to determine whether or not it was a bond for title.
Okay.
Simple question.
Well,
Most of that's already in the development authority's audit, which becomes a component of the county's audit, most
That's-
of which are CAFRs, so they have their comprehensive financial reports.
That's-
So all that information should be already available. If someone wants to read the
Yes.
audit of the DeKalb County government or the development authority of DeKalb County, they simply go on that website and pull up those reports. So I'm not sure how much more
Well-
duplication we need. So I'm just questioning that.
You are correct. At the end of the day, it is in the audit report and it is generally in a note, in some kind of an auditor's note associated with the report, but it's hidden. It's buried pretty deep. If DCA puts it on essentially a one-page form, it will provide us with information that is more available and informational, not only to the legislature, but also to Georgians. At the end of the day, a little later on, we'll get into some requests, but at the end of the day, our objective is to enhance transparency, and this is just an initial step to pursue that goal.
Mr. Chairman, let me suggest or state this. All these meetings are open to the public. They're advertised, or they should be. And I know the organization that I'm familiar with, they audit every year. And they're open for open records. If anybody wants anything. So I would be reluctant. I'd still believe that the local governments have some ability that they shouldn't be told what to do on everything by the state government or the federal government. So
The state already mandates that DCA collect
okay,
bond issuing information.
I'm good with that. But that'd be it.
So you would not be in favor of identifying whether the bond
No,
or title?
no.
So a question.
Sure.
So is so Chairman, so is the harm in it that you feel like it's just heavy handed, like for the locals should be able to handle it? Or I'm confused as to the objection because it just seemed not like a big thing.
Well, I'm afraid it would be a big thing.
Well,
You know,
can you
that's
explain?
all. No, huh?
Can you explain that to me?
Well, look, I can say this because you don't. We represent a lot of crazy people out there. And
Speak for
Yeah.
yourself. All mine are totally. legit.
yeah. So look, they have all the access that I think that's available to them. And I think that they can have access to this too, but at the right time.
Well,
Chairman,
I think.
Chairman,
interesting
Chairman
thing
Burns.
is- Yep, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I was gonna help Mullis there answer the question of, I think it's Senator Parent. I want to remind everyone that these projects where they're using these title for bonds is basically just conduit debt to issue the bonds through the county development authorities or the cities. They do not put any kind of financial obligation at all on the taxpayers. Zero. There's no liability at all. It's not on the balance sheet. It's not even listed as a balance sheet obligation in the audit. It's just basically a transaction to help these prospects get lower cost financing. So there's literally zero risk to these communities.
I hear your position, and I would not disagree. There is some concern potentially that conduit debt might be an issue in some bond transactions.
And look, Mr. Chairman, any member of the Georgia Senate can introduce any bill anytime they want to. during
Absolutely.
session.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Any further comments, discussions? Is there a recommendation?
I recommend to oppose.
So you recommend remove recommendation number 5. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, I have a motion to remove recommendation 5. Is there a second? I have a
Second,
second. I have a third. Okay. Yeah, so I have a motion and a second to remove recommendation number 5. All those in favor indicate with the uplifted hand. Number 5 is removed. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay, we're now moving into a category, that's all of the legislation. That's all of the legislation.
And again, Mr. Chairman, anybody can introduce any legislation. And if they explain it to convince the Senate, then it will pass.
Certainly. I agree. Again, it's not that it can't be done. It's just, that this is not the committee's position. We're going to move into 3 items. Is it 4? 4 items dealing with requests. Now, this is not legislation. This is simply a request to agencies, or in one case, an association, to ask them to do some additional evaluation, reporting, and work. The first one, number 6, is a request to the Department of Audits and Accounts to conduct a performance audit of local development authorities. Such a performance audit would serve to update the 2013 DOAA Local Development Authority audit. Additionally, the audit would focus on operation concerns, including competition among local development authorities with overlapping jurisdictions and potential conflicts of interest. I have spoken with the state auditor. We reviewed this request. He is willing to consider it. I have reviewed this request with the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and he is willing to consider it. So this would be a request through probably the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate to the state auditor. Is there any discussion on recommendation number 6?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I would just say that if it has not been updated since 2013, we're coming on 10 years. And given the fact that there was a lot of discussion brought forth to the committee, it would seem a wise move to have an updated audit, especially before considering any other more drastic changes, if we were to consider those to the current statute.
Let me say that we think our development authorities by statute or by constitution have been around for roughly 60 years. And there's been one audit in 60 years, and that was indeed a decade ago. So this is just a request that the Department of Audits and Accounts update the audit and provide information to the legislature on what their findings might be.
Can I ask a question on that?
Certainly.
I've been involved with a lot of different audits, and to include forensic audits, criminal
We'll have to
audits.
define that.
Yeah.
How do you define a performance audit of a local development authority? Are you going to audit their there's so many questions about that. I just don't know how you would define that in legislation even, but
We will not. This is not legislation.
I think requiring them to submit their annual report, their financial audits, is a good idea for the transparency, but to conduct a performance audit would require millions of dollars by the Department of Administrative Services. I would think all of this should be subject to financing in the budget, the appropriations process for sure, because this could literally cost tens of millions of dollars if there's 400 development authorities across the state. In order for the Department of Audits and Accounts to do a performance audit on each one of them, it would require a huge department of employees on a yearly basis, almost like the Department of Revenue does for tax audits for the tax assessor's office.
In discussions with the state auditor, they would define the scope of the audit, and they would define the standards by which they would evaluate development authorities. And it would not be a comprehensive audit. It would be a sampling based audit. And they do multiple types of these audits every year. I believe there's about 4 or 5 a year that they would do.
Mm-hmm.
So this would not be an inventory per se, or a comprehensive review of every development authority. It would be the Department of Audits and Accounts basically doing their job in evaluating this area of local government.
So we don't even have that requirement, Mr. Chairman, for cities and county audits. There's not an audit process for the Department of Revenue, for example, to audit a county government, unless it's some kind of a.
You may.
He was on
you-
silent.
You might, you may indeed be correct. We're not talking about revenue audits. We're talking about performance review.
Uh,
And this is,
yeah, I
it's not,
understand, but-
it's not unprecedented. It was done 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, provided a certain baseline. And then hopefully, an updated audit will provide additional insights.
Okay, I don't recall that being done 10 years ago, but I don't question your knowledge of that, but I would think we would at least put in here that it should be subject to appropriations.
I have no objection to that. We can certainly make it subject to appropriations. By the way, I don't know what the appropriations would be, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it would be substantial.
At a time when we aren't really sure how many active development authorities we have or what their potential level of financial debt is, it might be enormous. It might be reasonably nominal.
Well, we could, Mr. Chairman, probably figure out what the 2013 one cost and extrapolate from there.
But I'm not sure that that the legislature has to appropriate that. I believe.
Well, the department
the department
exists.
exists. So the department already exists, and this is a part of their operational responsibilities.
So then the
Oh, I
question,
think, I would disagree. I think if you put a piece of legislation through that's going to require annual audits of all of these development authorities.
This is
depending
not
on-
it's not an annual audit. This is a single review in 2020.
One time?
Yes, sir. Not annual.
Well, I mean, even
Basically-
then, they're gonna probably put out an RFP for consultants to do the work. I don't think, if they have the manpower sitting around to do this today, then maybe they're overstaffed.
They just completed and you should, I was thinking I sent everyone a copy. They completed an update of the the film tax credits. And conducted a film tax credit study in 2019, I believe it was.
yeah, we've gotten several over the last few
And
years.
then they updated it in 2022.
They need to leave it alone, man.
Well, like I say, it's just, I'm just saying.
Information,
It's information.
informational. Yeah, it doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, oh, sorry.
I've got an idea that may take the place of this being put into the report.
Okay,
You can ask the appropriations chairman of the House and the Senate to do this. They can request the Department of Audits to do specific audits like you're talking about. I think up to 3 different agencies every year. And so this could be one of their asks.
that is the
next-
strategy in this request.
Right,
that-
but you wouldn't
is
have
what-
to necessarily put it in this report, but you could still write that letter to Chairman Tillery and Chairman Hatchett in the House, and they could consult with one another and make that one of the priorities of the appropriations committees next year.
I would agree. I would agree.
Okay.
But I would hope that if the committee recommends a request, that the chairman, the good chairman, would be more likely to be supportive.
Okay,
Hey, also, Mr. Chairman, another caveat or a suggestion would be that already industrial development authorities and those other kind of entities do audits. The one I'm familiar with does one every year. Won't you add what they need, maybe something additional they need to be in their audit? And then they just send a copy to whoever you think they ought to send a copy to. I'm just suggesting that's a possibility.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
And I agree. I think it's interesting to note that not all development authorities are required to have an annual audit.
Probably the ones that deal with bonds do.
Probably the ones to do with financing do.
Yeah, I don't know
Exactly.
about all of them, but yeah.
But I just say not all.
Yeah,
of them
probably,
do.
I'd say you're right.
And it relates to how they were created statutorily
Sure.
or constitutionally. this would provide a third-party review that we as a legislature could have confidence in to ensure that information provided is accurate and appropriate. And again, to Senator Gooch's point, to Leader Gooch's point, this would come as a request through the appropriations chairs. I believe the chairman of finance in the Senate and the chairman of appropriations in the Senate can make requests for studies. And I believe in the House, it would be Ways and Means and Appropriations.
Yeah, that's right.
So what I'd ask the committee to consider is requesting this through we certainly can modify it through the chairman of appropriations in the Senate and add the caveat subject to any necessary funding. Does that satisfy your needs and concerns, Senator Gooch?
Yeah, let's move on.
All right. So if we're okay with that, we will modify number 6 to say request through the appropriations chairman in the Senate that the Department of Audits and Accounts conduct a performance audit. And at the end, we would add subject to necessary funding. Is that acceptable?
Bravo.
Yes.
All right. Are we good with that?
Mhm.
All right. Any further discussion? Do I have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Senator Rhett. I need a second. Second. Senator Parent. All those in favor, indicate uplifted hand. Thank you very much. So as modified, number 6 is adopted. We have a request. This is another conversation. We have a request that the Georgia Economic Development Association establish best practices. We heard a number of those in testimony, although they have not been codified. Establish their own best practice, develop an implementation plan for best practices adoption.
Maybe.
And within a year, they provide a self-assessment tool through which members can report the adoption of best practices. Because development authorities for different size communities have different needs, GEDA should establish best practices for metro area development authorities, rural development authorities, and non-metro, non-rural development authorities. I'm not sure. We're going to let them define their own best practice. We're going to ask them to define their own best practice, ask them to determine how they can share that with their membership, and then ultimately do a self-assessment that says, we do these things, but we don't do those things. There's nothing there that requires them other than we'd like to see your progress in a year. I've had a conversation with the president of GEDA. I believe they are comfortable with this request, and I'd like to ask the committee's consideration. Works a lot better.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. It works a lot better if they tell us what their best jobs are. Are you okay, Senator Moss? Each second. Second. Matter of fact, you've never cared, have you? No.
He's moved on from grunting though.
Would say, I don't ship again.
Oh, whatever. I didn't hear that. Senator Gooch, we're
Yep.
it's quickly degrading here, sir.
Good.
Are you okay
Go.
with GEDA best practices?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor indicate with uplifted hand. Thank you very much. We're gonna move on. Number 8. This is DCA. The next two are our good friends at DCA. This is I believe it's Senator Gooch made the request that they require annual registration reporting be submitted within 90 days. Currently it's 6 months. That is an administrative change. Is that true, Senator Gooch?
Yeah, but I don't know that I put 90 days in there. I would not tie it to 90 days after the end of the fiscal year. I would keep it to the current DCA requirements. And here's why. Local governments have, I believe, 6 months to complete their audits and get them submitted to the state. If they fail to do so, then they lose their QLG status, which is your local government qualification status, which means they can't apply for grants, permits from EPD. They don't get their LMIG monies from GDOT and so forth and so on. A lot of the county audits are tied to the water authorities and the development authorities and so forth and so on. They sort of all become a component of the major audit of the county. So they submit them all together. So I think we should let them all ride on the same calendar, the same schedule, if that makes sense.
I believe the current schedule is 6 months. Is that correct?
Yes, so I would say leave that alone.
All right, then I have a request to remove recommendation number 8
Yes.
without objection. Without objection? Okay. We'll remove number 8 without objection. Okay, we're trying to keep going here. Now, the number 9 is a pilot program that is a request for DCA to establish a pilot program collecting information on local development authorities and in collaboration with Department of Audits and Account, provide such information online. So transparency. It references code section 368016, Local Government Authorities Registration Act, requires annual registration for local governments. That's exactly the report that we're referring to with DCA. This is not the bond report, but this is their annual registration act. Recommends that pursuant to this authority, establish a pilot program for annual registration wherein the registering authorities must include additional information. This is not statute. This is a request administratively with DCA. Whether any issued revenue bonds were a bond for title, whether any lease agreements associated with an issued bond for title is construed as a usufruct or an estate for years, a copy of the schedule for any tax abatements, whether any bonds require payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot, and whether an intergovernmental agreement has been executed as a security for the bond. Number 9. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Senator Dixon.
Trying to remember back, isn't this information already available upon request? Like if we had an issue or had questions about a certain development authority?
I can't answer that definitively, but I've not found that to be the case, because when I asked these questions, the DCA indicated that they were not available.
Okay.
So that the information that I asked, they could not provide. Again, they did indicate that it was generally buried in the audit notes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's physically there, it's just not reported. All right, and if you notice, part of the request is that they work in concert with Department of Audits and Accounts so that the information can be shared, so the information can be available for individuals to provide access to citizens. And again, I recognize that creates some challenges, but it also creates some transparencies. What's the committee's preference on number 9? Any objections? Senator Gucci, okay?
I'm not comfortable with it at this point in time, but I don't want to be the only one in the room throwing water on it.
Again, this is a request. This is not legislation. This
Yeah.
is really a conversation with DCA about information available. Okay,
Oh, well, that's a good idea.
I'm with Gooch on this one.
meaning you are uncomfortable. I have 2 uncomfortables. I have 3
I'd
uncomfortables.
like to hear more from DOAA and DCA on it. I don't think we had
And
much
now
conversation.
you're arguing for a joint study.
Yeah,
committee.
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Now you're arguing for that joint study committee to be removed in number 1.
Right.
We are.
Good point.
I agree, and let me say I've had conversations with DCA, and I acknowledge up front that they are under resourced and that they need additional support in order to provide additional not oversight but information. This is a request. It is not a mandate.
What if you change this to say a request of those 2 agencies to give us a report on the necessity of something of this nature? Does that make sense? Let them sort of critique what you're looking for. I'm still trying to get my arms around what the issue is that we're looking for in number 9, because we haven't heard in all of our
Lost you briefly there, sir. Are you back?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're back. All right.
So we haven't heard any testimony from any constituents or any local governments or anyone that I can recall to where this has been abused or whether there's been a problem that's been identified. So I'm just trying to wonder if we're a problem, or is this a solution looking for a problem? I don't know.
I would hope not. And again, I'm not sure it's a solution. I think it's just an information request and utilizing DCA and Department of Audits and Accounts to collect that information and make it available.
See, I believe that, I think it's GASB already requires this.
Absolutely. And
And
you
so-
are, GASB, what is it, 77? GASB 77 does require this information. All we're doing is making it available.
So
this-
is it not already available?
It is
in
available. It is available
County.
buried in audit notes. It is available buried in audit notes. And for 400 potential development authorities,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
it's a request. What is the will of the committee?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? You'll die for the light.
I got to support.
All
Madam Chair, I can't leave.
right, so I have a motion and a second,
Thank you, Doc.
a reluctant second, I'll acknowledge, a
My
reluctant
good friend to
second.
the rescue.
All those in favor, in uplifted hand, we'll see if we get any at all. I got two. All those opposed, same sign. I see two.
No,
Mr. Gooch, no, he's a no,
No.
so that's a goner as well.
It's a goner.
Chairman, I know I was late and it brings me great sadness.
Don't tell me you're leaving.
I gotta be in Somerville at 6 o'clock and I saw that traffic coming in.
Somerville. Well, you might stick around for just one or two more.
All right.
Yeah,
we're almost finished.
We're almost two. All right.
Don't let Chairman Mullis leave yet. He's,
No, you need his
Almost.
vote and you know it. All
tie
right,
him down.
all right. There are two, again, there are two recommendations under the title of Explore. And by the way, Explore is nothing more than an acknowledgement that there might be an issue and that we might want to address it at some point in the future. One is to allow local and joint county delegations to pass local legislation with additional coordination or review requirements beyond state law in counties with overlapping jurisdictions and development authorities. Such legislation would serve to ensure harmony among local governing agencies, minimizing conflicts and unnecessary competition between authorities with overlapping jurisdictions, and provide a safeguard against potential abuse. What is the will of the committee on recommendation 10?
Chairman Burns,
Yes, sir.
to me, this one makes more sense than anything we've done yet. And
I
so
agree.
Wow.
I agree.
I
Second,
believe I would make a motion on this one and move on to number 11.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other concern or discussion?
Yeah, my successor would be totally for all this, so. Anyway.
Is that good or bad?
My vote would be no, but.
That's okay. All those, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate uplifted hand, and all those no. Thank you, 4-1. 4-1, I got it. All right. And of course, I have too, several times. The last recommendation. And this is the more controversial legislation.
Yeah.
All right,
You saved the worst for last.
I saved the best for last.
The worst.
Because this committee is already primed to take action. Explore legislation providing standing for local taxing jurisdictions impacted by local development authority decisions. Now,
That's a lot of stuff in there.
there is, but let me caveat the recommendation. It is to explore, it is not to propose or execute. We heard from multiple entities, ACCG, GMA, and Georgia School Board, all requesting standing. Matter of fact, they felt that was the potential solution. I'm personally not convinced that standing is the solution. I would suggest that best practices is a better way to go. However, I'm not sure I want to take it off the table and just say we're not going to do it. I think we have to continue to explore that as an alternative. And I'll open it up to committee.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I agree with what you said about standing, I think was coming for those that feel that we do need to be seriously considering a few little changes, not getting in the way of Georgia being the number one place to do business, but in fact, furthering that goal, right, with our development authorities, making sure that things are harmonious and we're not wasting a lot of time and money fighting with each other. I believe that some of them offered up standing because there was nervousness that the whole notion of getting into opening up the code section for things like best practices was going to be too much. I think some of them might actually prefer the best practices.
I would hope they would. And I would hope that best practice would resolve this issue. I will parrot my friend, Representative Oliver, Chairman Oliver. If we as a legislature or development authorities as a profession do not resolve the issue, the court will. And that will be to all of our detriment. I would much prefer that before they go to bond standing, the bond validation hearing, that everyone is supportive of the project and not at odds with the project. And I believe that can happen. The best way really is through best practice. The worst way would be through legislation. But until we get to a point where our development authority profession adopts best practices, I think we should always consider the fact that that's an alternative.
Mr. Chairman, may I offer one other sentence or two just for the discussion? I don't think the worst option is legislation. I think the worst option is litigation, because as soon as somebody sues somebody, you're going to lose the deal. And
That's right.
if you create standing, what you're going to force is the obligation to talk to each other, because litigation is always going to lose the deal. And if you want to just fight it out, it's going to take 1 to 3 years of money lost. And litigation is the worst option, and that's where we are right now. That's all I'll add. Thank you, sir.
To
Mr.
piggyback on
Chairman?
that is that-
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, just to piggyback on that is that the standing requirement would hopefully force, really the goal is to force the discussion on the front end, right?
Mr. Chairman, I am refreshed by that comment that a lawyer would tell us that the litigation is the worst way to go.
I
have been
I know
reassured.
more about how bad litigation is, Chairman Mullis, than many on the planet, because I've been doing it for decades.
Well, I admire that.
Expensive, it's time consuming, people are mad, and lawyers don't get paid a lot of times, and it's just a bad option when you have other options available.
I agree with Chairman Oliver. I acknowledge the fact that a delay essentially eliminates the deal, kills the deal. And in order for us to do a good job in Georgia, we have to get people together harmoniously to pursue a project, because delay kills it. What is the will of the committee? We're at the last.
I oppose.
Chairman
I got a
Burns,
opposition. Does that mean you have a motion that we remove this recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a motion. Is there?
second.
Senator Gooch.
Goose,
Yep.
what do you want?
I'm highly against this one too. I've seen this play out in court. All this is a lawyer employment act. And if cities and counties can't get along before a validation hearing, you sure don't need a city going into a courtroom in the 11th hour before a $1 billion deal gets put before the courts, and then allows it to get killed and struck down. Time kills deals in real estate. And I just think that's a terrible idea. They're using other people's money to pay these lawyers to go in court to fight. And I just think it's a terrible idea. So I would oppose this. And
I have a motion and a second opposing this recommendation, and I don't disagree with you. Again, I'll go back to maybe Senator Parent's comment. The objective here is to ensure that development authorities engage their local jurisdictions early in the decision process.
Right.
So that they won't get to a point of needing a legal challenge. However, I acknowledge the will of the committee. Is I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on number 11? If not, those in favor of Senator Mullis's motion to remove the recommendation indicate the uplifted hand. All those opposed, Senator Gooch, you are
He is
in favor, you are against the recommendation in
Yes.
favor of Mullis's motion, all right?
Correct. That's correct.
Those opposed, one. Senator Parent?
No, I voted for it because I think it's better on the front end. I mean, but I,
All right.
but I hope that those opposed to that help work on the best practices. And also I do think there's some need to have further conversation, which I suppose we can do outside of a formal study committee.
I think it's better on the front end because if you're not careful, it can cause a problem with your negotiations when you start showing
We
your hand.
totally agree.
Essentially, I'd rather have it available on the back end than nothing, but I would much rather have it on the front end. than
Also, I
on the
want to
back end.
say parting is such sweet song
Sweet
to
sorrow.
Chairman Mullis.
We're crying crocodile tears. All right. In summary, recommendation 1 was removed. Recommendation number 2 was adopted, recommendation 3 was adopted, recommendation 4 was adopted, recommendation 5 was removed, recommendation 6 was modified, recommendation 7 was adopted, recommendation 8 was removed, recommendation 9 was removed, recommendation 10 was adopted, recommendation 11 was removed. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, the majority didn't pass.
I don't know. We'll count up later. All right. Any further discussions?
Are you mad, Senator Mills?
He's
Never.
never mad. He
You-
gets
you had-
even.
yeah,
He
he was
gets
like,
even.
I had dental surgery 2 days ago.
Chairman Burns,
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for all your work and your patience through this whole process and
Here,
done a
here.
great job.
I
And
appreciate
whole
this
committee.
committee. You
Yeah,
have added enormously to
I
this.
will,
project.
do you need a motion to approve the final report?
I need a motion to approve the final report.
I do
Well,
So moved.
I have a motion from Senator Gooch, a second from Senator Rhett. For those in favor of adopting the final report, I need a formal vote. I need a
Yes.
formal vote on approving the
Yeah.
final report.
Yes.
It passes unanimously. Thank you to the committee for your good work. I wish you all very Merry Christmas, and I look forward to seeing you in early January. This
All
meeting
right.
is adjourned.
That's what you said.
Merry Christmas.